Good morning. It's morning here anyways. It's like 10:30ish. So I haven't made videos in over a week, and basically, as I said on my last few videos, which I even forgot to post, that I have been drawn into a pendulum, a thought form, a group of ideas that another person was presenting, and when that happens to me and I get overwhelmed, I have to pull away. I have to pull away and process through what reality is anymore. And this is what I want to talk about, because every morning Spirit gives me something, but I'm not always in a space of mind or in a place where I currently live where I can share all that. Currently I'm homeless, but I'm living with relatives, and thus said relatives are very Christian orientated, and so they wouldn't care to know what I'm having to share, and they would find it very offensive because it's too mixed for them. So what Spirit said to me this morning, or I like to get in my soul. People like Spirit, but that makes me think of, this is myself spiritually who ascended down through the stars, through the planets, picked up the vibratory things I did in my time, in my season, in this little pendulum clock thing we live in, and the reality, and I lighted here in a body. But what I like to do is get into my soul, which is usually where I'm just completely at rest, meditative state, and then things from Spirit come up, because soul's what everything's born out of. Soul is what everything comes from. I'll talk about that like another day, my opinion on that. But you've got to realize in this reality, everything is going to be opinions right now. And this is what I want to talk about. The Lawless One coming. Now, some of you people don't believe in Christianity, so understand I'm using this as an archetype. It's the archetype I'm most familiar with. I got some Greek gods, some goddesses, some of the Brahma stuff, some of the Vedic stuff, shamanic stuff. To me, all this is shamanic anyways. There is no separation in all of these things. So, consciousness. Before the Christ consciousness comes, that's been spoken about in every single religion and kept hidden, sexual rights, because especially in Christianity, oh my goodness, nothing can be about sex, because if then the lawless one comes and everything's lawless and insanity, and you won't be able to control your lust of your flesh. And I wonder if that's what happened when Jesus came, huh? So I'm going to be using these archetypes. So if they're not your archetypes, say if yours is Odin, or Vedic scriptures, or whatever your religion is, I'm speaking via the archetypes I'm familiar with. So I'm sorry if they're not familiar to you. I will try to make them, as familiar as I can while I'm speaking through them. So those of you who understand the story of Christ, there's an Old Testament pendulum, there's a New Testament pendulum. They're basically two ideas of God fighting. In the end, an idea of the old God, which people in Christianity generally don't get, because they're worshiping a cult and not a consciousness, not a spirit, who they've been told over and over again, the God is a spirit. You can only worship him in your spirit truth. And they put and in there. There are no ands in the Bible. So if you're pissed at me for taking things out, realize there are things that have been put in order for it to jive with English. So basically, there were two pendulums, and these two pendulums are fighting for a consciousness inside of human beings. The old order, the old law, the old consciousness that needs to evolve and fall away is one of law. We can't operate without law. And then there's this Jesus who's like, no, it's not about law, the Christ consciousness. It's about the fruit of your spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, meekness, self-control. Against such there is no law. If we had all these things in us as human beings, we would need no laws written in stone, written on paper, written on cloth, written on our forehead. So it talks about in the end people being marked on the hand and the forehead. In the Jewish, in the old law, which there's these two pendulums fighting right now. Now, these are not the only stories. They're only two gods that I'm representing in the conscious duality archetype, so I don't confuse the hell out of myself and everyone else while I'm trying to talk. So if you need to think of this purely as figurative, do. If you need to think of this purely as, yes, your God's returning, and this is what's going to happen, and it's the end times of this consciousness in these human beings, do that. You know, whatever way you can grasp what I'm saying. Alchemists are brilliant, so I'm hoping the people mostly watching me are alchemists, and they can get things. Brilliant as in the consciousness. Sadly, more of them need to bring that to the spirit and have not. They think a lot of them raise their kundalini. I haven't kept mine there. It's risen, but I am conscious, you know, of what's going on in the world, but I've been going through getting burned down a lot by a twin flame, and I needed it. Like, when I realized that person was my twin flame and we were both nutso wacko, and a lack of consciousness that has never been seen before was coming to this earth, man, you better bet that I held on to that motherfucker, because he was definitely trying to kill my consciousness and set up his own law in my heart. And in a way, I was doing that to him because I was clinging. So, you know, everything with twins, we got a mirror. I'll talk about it more, but today is about consciousness. So, a complete lawlessness of the mind needs to come, needs to be seen, needs to be here before the consciousness, the evolution and consciousness of Christ, that love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, till that purges the body and the mind is singular, as in, this is what we're doing, this is the consciousness, this is the truth. If we don't all light on one way and one truth and one light, the consciousness is just going to be everywhere. You got kids that were literally raised on the archetype of video games. And those of you who don't get how serious this is, watch some of, let me suggest somebody that's not too ridiculously legalistic, Sadhguru. I still don't agree with his one philosophy and oneness. That's okay. He's about keeping the mind and the heart pure so that we go through this time period and don't fall apart. That's his mission. That's beautiful. That's not against the mind of Christ. So I'm going to use him as an example. If you go and watch stuff that he says, and don't get lost in his pendulum, because he is his own thought form, and I don't know if he tells you that or not, because I don't follow him that closely, but he has taught me a lot about separating myself from the, you know, the mind-body whole issue. So he talks about how children, and we're all children in some respects in our mind because we're about to evolve beyond that stage, they all need a reality. They all need a singularity. They all need something to develop their personality on and their identity on. And many of us have never had that growing up. I had Christianity, thankfully, as somewhat of a guide, but my parents actually living it out was not there for me. My dad tried super, super hard, but my mom was very mentally ill. So to me, like, my dad is the perfect example of the law and trying to hold things together with the law and the love of Christ. And my mom is the perfect example of where the mind collective is going. She's a clinical bipolar narcissistic. So, and she's improved much over her life. She's in her late 70s now. But having to move back in with them has taught me a frick ton about myself, because basically when I hit with my twin flame, everything that I hated about my mother came out of me. It was like she came alive in me and lived through me. And it was like all my DNA and all my past and all the things I'd ever done or lied about or hadn't been conscious about when I was doing, or my ancestors were doing. It was like, it just all came up. And so literally I went insane. I was broken down, and I knew, having studied, thankfully, some shamanic things, I needed to rest, number one, which they weren't going to let me do. They were on me with their law, their boundaries, their beliefs 24/7, trying to break down my mind. And I wouldn't let them, because that's my privilege. That's for me to do. That's not for anybody else to do. So I'm thankful for all the lessons I've learned from everybody else about how to be my own guru, my own, my own mind. So what we're taught is to first have an identity. So first you need an identity. So a lot of times for us in this world, think of yourselves as children, even though you're adults. Think of yourself as a children. You need certain archetypes and certain things that you cling to in order to mature, so that there's a oneness, so that there's some form of reality. But now we're getting to the point where there is no reality, and there is going to soon be no reality, and the way we always deal with that is through revolution, is through change, is through chaos, because the chaos has to happen before the revolution and the evolution. So in your mind, okay, you can think of this like I had horrible flashbacks last night of being in the French Revolution with my twin flame, because I remember being there with them. Unless I'm wrong and they're a soulmate or comic, which is neither here or there. The point is to burn me down. The point is for me to shamanically work through all of this shit that's in my own mind. It's in the mind collective. So the reason twin flames are coming together, though, is because they're trying to maintain a oneness and a consciousness before it leaves the earth. So basically, when the Lawless One comes and returns in the form of an anti-Christ consciousness, we need the law, we don't need Christ. We don't need this, we can't make ourselves have love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, meekness, self-control. So we need a law. Look at the Georgia Guidestones. You really look into that shit, and it's deeply, horribly disgusting. It is an Old Testament, old Mayan, all the old gods mixed. Like, if you knew the depth, it sounds beautiful. Oneness sounds beautiful. But when you get to the point where it's written on stone and it's a law again, and it doesn't come from the mind being free and sovereign, it's horrible. It's a butcher. It's insanity. It's ripping your heart out and eating it. It's zombie apocalypse. It's people having no mind. And so the one has to, the Lawless One. And it's weird that in the New Testament we call him the Lawless One, and we refer to him as Satan. And then the lawgivers, the legalists, refer to Christ as Satan, literally. But he's like, Satan doesn't work against himself. He doesn't heal people. He doesn't take down the wall of partition between you and your God consciousness and source. He erects a new temple. He erects a new external temple. He erects a new law, a new system, a government, and that's how he expects you to survive. I learned so much from being with my twin flame because I understood grace to a degree before, and then he was very legalistic, and so the two of us coming together were like perfect combinations of rip your world apart. So the Georgia Guidestones has one law in it. It talks about you can eat a limb if first you separate it from the living thing. So the living thing can stay living, but you've got to eat. You can eat the limb as long as you separate it from the living thing. Like, you've got to think of this in terms of even genetics. Like, we're making meat that's just like a limb now, no cow, and saying that's better, and that's like taking parts of a whole and denaturing something, taking the seed and the life force out of it is going to bring you sustenance. No, it's going to drive you mad. It's going to be like eating your own flesh. That's my opinion. So zombie apocalypse is basically written in those Georgia stones. It's the law. It's the old Mayan law where you rip out the heart, you have a sacrifice, goat, have a sacrifice, kid, have a sacrifice, bull, have a sacrifice. If you understand the Old Testament, it is no different than Baalism. And people are going to be highly offended that I say this, because that's the conscious they were following as God. And I understand this, and I apologize, with all my heart that your reality isn't my reality. But there needs to be no reality first, and this is what's going to happen. So when lawlessness comes and there's no more conscious reality, and people are like, I literally have heard pastors online this week, devoted pastors and Christians, and this pendulum guy I was talking about in the beginning, being torn down in their consciousness, where in 1 minute they're like, there's no reality, this is all a game, it's all Maya, complete to some degree. And then this is the law, and then Christ is going to come save us all, the aliens are going to drop down, and this is the conscious collective story. And there is no more reality, there's no more identity singular. So it's the perfect time for an antichrist to come and say, here's a law, and if we all follow this law of oneness that's been twisted, because the law of oneness is beautiful and true, if it's followed in sovereign consciousness without somebody else having to tell you what it is. Because if not, it's not a gift of grace. It's not a gift of the Christ consciousness. It's a gift of some external law from the outside that's controlling you. And as I know with my mate, they still believe in all that. They're falling apart because America's falling apart. I don't care that America's falling apart, because America is a tribe in heart. America is not a thing with laws and rules and free services and not so free services and insurance that's messed up all the medical industry and greed, greed, greed. That's not my America. My America is in my consciousness and in my heart. And what is that? That we all could be sovereign nation here. That we could have been a sovereign nation. That's reality. Oh, but your forefathers and we need the law. Yeah, I get you. We needed a law because we're children. We don't know our own minds. We don't have our own consciousness. Do you understand what I'm saying? That consciousness has to dissolve before the Christ comes. This is why in the Revelation, which was written by Essenes and Gnostics, basically, which have been rejected from the Christian Bible for a long time till they're figuring out they actually need it now. So Revelations was written by these people who were Christ conscious ascended, so they could see the mind, collective, in the heart, where it should be and where it would be someday when we evolve. Because right now, biologically, I'll tell you, if all you can think of this is in a biological sense, because it saves you from the insanity of Christianity, of archetypes, of religions, go check out humancondition.com. He talks about it from a totally scientific. But if you know your archetypes and you know your religions and you know that these were to keep your mind sane all these years and not harm you, but now that's harming you and you don't need it anymore, so you need to put it aside, you'll understand he talks about from a biological migratory mind. Like we're birds, our mind is migrating, we're having to learn to have our own sovereignty, to fall apart, to come together again. Even nations will tell you this is what it's about. But in the end times, nation rides against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There is no oneness. There will be oneness in hearts and minds, and that's the Kundalini, the Christ consciousness, the crystal mind, the fifth dimension you guys talk about, which I don't agree it's so fifth, but I think we're beyond that. But people haven't seen grace yet, and if you haven't seen grace in the fifth dimension, you haven't moved beyond it. So basically, let me try to make this clear. Consciousness is going to dissolve. An anti-Christ, an anti-your own sovereignty, your own consciousness, you bearing fruit in your own body, in your own mind of love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, meekness, self-control, all that's going to fall apart. It's, you know, like, we've never had this. It's never really been here. Christ never came. This isn't the truth. It's a lie. It's an archetype. So, yeah, don't go against the person Christ, who was just the form that had to come here to bear an archetype so that things would move along in the consciousness of humanity. You know, you need to see it as that. The Krishna, the old Vedic stuff, these things have happened before, and those are old tales of where the consciousness fell and was eradicated and a new form of consciousness was set up. Well, what do you want it to be this time? Do you want it to be the Law and Jaja Guidestones? Do you want it to be the New Age oneness where nobody can think for themselves and aliens have to ascend into your mind and tell you what goodness is, and then you have no grace to follow it because you haven't risen your Kundalini, or if you have, you still are clinging to a law? So there is no truth of Christ consciousness in you as a singularity by yourself, and that has to happen first before it happens collective. I'm going to get heated and talk real fast, because not because I lack time, but because this is how I am in the flow. It's like when I'm reading poetry, and I love to say to the lover of my soul, myself, and my twin flame, this is who I am, this is what I spit. This is spit. And you can bring me and I can spit my poetry in front of the public, but they ain't going to get any of the archetypes. They're going to think of it as government or religion or something other than what it is. It's me, it's my soul. It's our soul. Soul is eternal rest and eternal peace, and the consciousness needs to ascend. So, these two pendulums, put whatever archetype you want of the old things, the law, the Odin, but he was about all oneness more than Christianity was. So if you want to fall back into these old minds of war, and we must conquer the human, to conquer the mind, to quell the mind, well then all these nations start fighting about what's the religion, what's the archetype, What's the truth? We need a law. Set up a kingdom. Make the new kingdom. Make the Christ consciousness come in. Force it. You're forcing insanity on people. It's why gurus have you sitting in this. I'm not the body. I'm not even the mind. I'm not the body. I'm not even the mind. Disassociate from all the pendulums of left, of right, of in, of out, of above, of a below, and just be nothing for a minute. So you can come into eternal rest and equilibrium. And then all these other things that the tormentors of the law have and the Christ consciousness can barely hold on to because it hasn't been fully realized, only in some. So like Gnostics and different religious texts, they'll say, it's the Kundalini rising and then we take over the nations and we're the... No. The Kundalini rises and the mind takes over the nation, the vessel, the body. Once that's done in a collective group for one reason, to bear fruit of a conscious mind, then that will happen in a collective. But if you want to go back to needing a law because your mind and your body is lawless and you can't overcome your need for the 7 deadly sins, need is not elimination of them. Maybe for a time you need to eliminate these things because your mind needs a law to rule it still. You're still a child. If your mind needs a law to rule you, you're still a child. If you can't just produce automatically like a guru, like a saint, love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, meekness, self-control, against such there is no law, no harm to others, no need for a law and an oppressor to bring you into a schooled mind. Graduate. It's time to graduate and you're falling apart and you're fucking nervous and are you going to pass the test? What's going down? Is Jesus going to come save us? Is an alien? Is a cube going to fall from heaven? Is it going to say it's now the law and set up a new kingdom? What does it matter? First, you need to understand that stillness. Come back to the real God. The God that existed before all the pendulums and all the gods. The source, the mother, father that you were birthed out of. There was a mother, there was emptiness, and then there came a seed and a light. But before the seed and the light, there was a mother that could create life in her womb without a male. Tell that to men who still believe the law and that there's a male that's ahead. Well, sorry, but biological science may have this from you, but it's also been proven that Miriam, sorry, it just came out. It's an archetype. So that she can produce by herself without a man. Yeah, so that's not just a spiritual thing. It's not just a story about Jesus Christ and the law. It's not just a story of your biology. It's a story of the collective mind. So get into that space where you're just in the womb. Call it a male or a female. Call it what you want. But the womb is darkness. The seed has to fall into the darkness and be covered with that darkness before it can spring forth. And this is also, you're going to notice that some of you, the story of the Kundalini. It's buried in that desire. It's buried in all that muck. It's buried in that, who the hell am I? Am I just these laws and these rules and these foundations that have been built? And now, in order for this fire to rise, all those foundations have to be pulled down? Yes, I get that. But you see, right now, for all your Kundalini exercises, you've made laws and rules out of something that should have been love to the body. You refuse to explain to people what is going on with their mind. And I understand if you believe in your law and in your kingdom, that's all cool. And you need that. And you need that law before you let shit hit the fan and people realize there's no longer a consciousness. Why? Because a new consciousness is coming and the old one has to be eradicated. It has to fall down. It has to fall apart. And there are those of you who have to go outside the lines. And some of that has been horribly destructive in order to realize there is no law and that there is grace. And that's why in Christianity people feared grace for so long more than anything. It was like the Antichrist. Because you take away their law. You take away their sanity. You take away their realization that everything has been built on laws and rules. And we need laws and rules. Because if the universe doesn't have laws and rules, it's going to fall apart. And if it does, it goes back to the mother, back to nothing. So what are you afraid of? Like coming into your own consciousness? Oh, the world's gonna... Yeah, no, don't worry about the world falling apart and reality falling apart. Don't. You can't stop this from happening. Yes, you're going to cry. You're going to fall apart. You're going to see the world falling apart. You're going to see, if you just stop and think, and I don't like to because that's bringing your mind into a realm you don't need to be in. The countries are falling apart. The laws are falling apart. People are killing each other more than ever before. People are going crazy more than ever before. Now we've got a disease ripping us apart, fake or not, more than ever before. It's part of the cleansing of this earth. Yeah, whether it's in the mind of the crazy dark people that want to follow the law, or it's in the Christ consciousness. In the end, it's going to benefit us. Oh, but Shilin, then you're saying that you're with the people who want to destroy. You must be Kabbalah, you must be... No, bullshit. There is neither or. Let your mind fall apart on that one. Get into yourself and realize there are two laws, dark and light, pendulums, good, bad, left, right. Consciousness, duality. No consciousness. We need duality. No. This is why in the end you're going to beg the rocks and hills to fall on you when the Christ consciousness comes. I'm there. I'm falling apart. I've fallen apart this past week because I entered into another pendulum. Because I allowed a consciousness of another human being that's also falling apart to tell me what reality is. And I got scared and I tripped up and I lost who I was, just like I do around my twin flame every time. Because this is going to go a little longer than half an hour, because we're talking about the mind falling apart, so I may have to make it in two pieces because the mind can only digest. Really in 15 minutes I should be making these, but I don't know how to edit the videos that way. Yeah, I'm not a tech person. Technically I'm not a person, so we'll leave it at that. People want to say they're spirits, and that's good, but to me, I don't find who I am until I enter the nothing, the consciousness of the mother, which is suicide. People who go to suicide, who go crazy enough to kill themselves, are little people that are so damaged they need to go back to the mother. I've done it before. I've gone there. You go to nothing. The only way you know nothing is hell is when you come back here and you compare total darkness and nothing to light, and you're like, oh, I want the light. I want the consciousness. I need the consciousness. There's people that get to a point where they can't handle the consciousness and they don't need it anymore and they kill themselves. Look at the Krishna story. What happened when the Krishna fell? When he was murdered and the people came and started murdering his tribe and his wives, and the one who was holding together the tribe, I'm not going to say names because I'm not going to relate to many of these things. They're not my story, but I hope to you, some of you, it relates as part of your story and your kingdom you built the base of your consciousness on, which needs to be torn down, sorry to say. But anyways, in this story, he couldn't protect the wives. This man that was commissioned to to protect the woman, to protect the wife that held the consciousness of the Krishna. And so these women started drowning themselves and setting themselves on fire. And like, we're not going to be taken by these lawless men. This is what's happening to the bride of Christ right now. To the consciousness, to the woman. Well, women have always dealt with it. Woman, you have more power to deal with this in you than you freaking realize, because you understand that you've been based on man's dissolving of the mind and the body over and over and over and over again through all eternity. And a lot of us women just want to go, we're like, bring the mother back, annihilate it all, wipe it clean. Oh, what's a horrible thing to say. No, it's in your mind too. And you had better admit it so that you can get through this time. Because yes, it's all true. Someday this world's going to go back to the mother. But first the Christ consciousness has to come. And the story and the archetype goes, whether you want to follow it or not, the consciousness is evolved into a new being. People will say the crystal being, the crystal mind, the Christ consciousness, the Krishna returning for the bride. That has to happen. The reason why you're meeting twin flames is because you're conscious enough in the collective to say, I need that other one to tear me down. So, the bride is not the law. The bride is the one that stays neutral to everything. The bride is the one that stays conscious in the insanity. She's not the one that says, I'm going to drown myself, I'm going to burn myself. maybe to the ground in conscious context. I'm going to drown myself in the mother. I'm going to burn myself in the flameless fire, the jinn of myself, the genie, the demon, because that's in us, in all of us. We're not apart from the oneness. You are not going to stick on me Kabbalah and demons and bullshit. They're all archetypes of the mind, and until you get that, you are going to be torn down by what's to come, because you're going to be looking for demons and giants to serve. The demons, the consciousness, came into woman in every storyline and bore up giants of the mind who became pendulums and gods, who became monsters if they were not having self-control, and literally ate human beings. And there's the Laura and the Georgia stones and the giants returning again, the Nephilim, the consciousness that could never die. If you want to call that jinn and the archetype. Well, we've all got some of that in our genetics, and our jinn, and our genes, and our genie. We're not separate. And this is what's coming. You're not going to be able to say, the Masons, the Kabbalah, the... No, I kept writing about that for years. It wasn't the Kabbalah, it wasn't the Masons, it wasn't the Gnostics. It was the mind. The mind. And when I knew I met my twin flame, I was like, tear my mind down. And I went insane. And I let myself go insane. Shamans will understand what I'm talking about, and those of you who have been through insanity. You have to, in Jungian philosophy, you have to let go of all these archetypes and see them as an archetype in a story in order to know that you will be risen again. You're going to lose your mind. In that process, the bride may drown some. The bride may burn some. The bride may dissolve some back to the mother. But the point is that the Christ consciousness comes, and I'm not letting go of that because I fucking know what it is. And it isn't just Kundalini, and it isn't all these old religions and these old thought forms and these old laws. If you do not let go of lawlessness and your idea of what that is, and you need something to control you, you're still a child, you're still in school, and when the Christ consciousness comes, it's going to tear you the fuck down. You're going to go crazy. You're going to wish the rocks and hills could cover you and exhaust you. And translate this into any religion, and any archetype, and any revelation. The Kabbalah going around saying, the revelation is coming, fuck you. No, that's not what we all think. Some of us think about what I'm talking about right now. And I've studied bits and pieces of everything. So if you want to accuse me of being it all, accuse me of being it all. Accuse me until you're sitting in tears crying, because there is no longer a reality. Digest that so that the Christ consciousness can be awakened in you. And I'm sorry for those of you, like my twin flame taught me, to exercise the body. Why? Is it about the body? No. Your body is to keep yoga, Tai Chi, which I recommend Tai Chi more than all those things, dancing in the spirit, drumming. Don't let people tell you how to heal yourself. As a shaman, you need to do all of these things. As an alchemist, you need to do all of these things. You need to bring all the branches of the mind together, all the branches of the lungs together, all the uterus, all the seed, everything. Does the consciousness still have a seed of life left in it? Well, then hold it aflame for the Christ, because the consciousness is coming to the collective. And there are so many stories out there, and you need to keep yourself separate from the stories and realize they're archetypes. Archetypes don't save you. You save yourself by staying sane in this. Is death coming to us? Yes, maybe. Yes, prepare yourself for it. Yeah, you're going to fall apart like I did. You're going to be scared. You're going to have terror. You're going to witness the witness. You're going to witness the witness that came into the nothing to the mother to light this, plant the seed in it so the Christ consciousness could come. Over and over and over again, that is the creation story to the minutest level. We are mind in a body, in this realm, experiencing these same archetypes over and over and over again in the macro and the micro. So yes, you are being broken down right now. Your consciousness is descended into the pits of hell, like Persephone, like I can't even think of the names of Persephone, the story of Hades. You know, like what happened to every single archetype. Odin hung himself in the tree, head buried in the ground. The woman, she descends into hell, head buried into the ground. the tree archetype, head buried into the ground. We have an upper and lower consciousness. All these archetypes are talking about these. I do your religion no sacrilege. God, because if you would have told me this 20 years ago, I would have said you were nuts, and I would have wanted you to I just would have shut you out. You're nuts. No, but people nowadays want to kill you if you don't agree with their conscious mind. I want to kill the tormentors. I want to kill the demons in me. And sometimes that's reflected to you so minutely in your twin flame or your karmic. Either one, let them burn you to the ground. It doesn't matter who they are. If they return to you to complete the consciousness and they're here with you to come into the Christ consciousness, wonderful. But if they're going to debate and just be full of laws and bullshit, and I was just archetypes and pissed the legal person completely off, it's how I relate, it's how I talk, it's who I am to save my fucking soul and to save yours. Does that sound so horrible? Your soul can't be touched, people. So I'm going to go on to the next video because this has gone too far, and I'm going to talk about the soul in the next one. Follow me on Facebook if you want to see my writings and the things Spirit has me write. And I do sometimes enter into pendulums and talk about past and future. So understand there I'm being in my flesh. But my Christ consciousness is this, it's returning. So I'm going to talk about the soul so you don't be scared to death that you might possibly die before Christ returns. It's okay. You'll be in Christed. You'll be included. You won't be excluded in the evolution of man. You're in us all. You want to be woke and conscious for it. I get it. Fear won't take you there. So let's talk about that in the next video, what your soul is.